Looks like I'm blurry. Let me fix that. All right, everybody, welcome on in. I am in the midst of having a cold, so you will have to forgive my voice and the occasional coughing that occurs. Right. So if I lose my train of thought for a minute, I'm just trying to focus and get through this with a cold. So, couple things I want to point out to everyone. Some pretty important stuff. Basically, the class is wrapping up. This happens so fast. This whole course just sort of flew by. And it's all kind of coming to an end. The class officially ends December 3rd. So everything's got to be turned in by December 3rd. I can't take anything after December 3rd because that's after the course has ended. And in order to do that, there's other paperwork that has to be filled out. And it can only be filled out under certain conditions. So basically, get everything done by December 3rd if you don't want to take statistics again, okay? And I'm not trying to be like insensitive. I just want to make sure everyone understands because, you got to sort of understand the emails that I'm going to be getting on like the 3rd about can stuff be turned in later. And there's school policies. I literally am not supposed to take stuff after that because then it's not fair to the students who got it in on time, right? So if I let some students turn it in on a later date, then students could say, well, why did he let her turn stuff in at the end of the weekend, but I had to turn it in at the beginning of the weekend? Like, we just can't have any of those kind of discrepancies. So everything's got to be turned in December 3rd, unless you have like a medical condition that needs to be dealt with. Like, so I think this is my 9th year here at Ventura College, twice people have been given incompletes, where me and the dean both agreed to sign the paper, and both times it was a female giving birth at the time of the final exam. So I think most people can sort of agree, oh yeah, if a woman is giving birth in the hospital during the exam, then it makes sense she could take it at a different time, right? Also, that was verifiable, that a birth was taking place, right? Just be aware, unless you have something like that. I get a lot of emails. I'm just trying to preempt the emails I'm going to get. A popular one that I get is, I wasn't paying attention when I booked my Disney cruise. Guess I won't be around for the end of the class. That's a problem. So it's a little less of a problem since you're turning everything in online, but you get what I'm getting at. We can't extend things, okay? So make sure you're getting stuff in when it needs to be in. With that said, there's a few new things I want to make sure to show you because they're sort of up now. Everything you need to finish up the class. So you've got 3 new things down here. You've got the project discussion about hypothesis testing. Basically, run some hypothesis tests on your problems that you're working on, the stuff that you learned about in Chapter 10. Run your hypothesis tests, post them in here. Easy points as long as you're using StatCrunch, you're doing legitimate hypothesis tests, your conclusions make sense, easy points. And then you're going to be more or less ready to put those into your project. On December 3rd, by December 3rd, I need your completed project. Okay, I need those turned in by December 3rd. I can't take them after that. Then it opens up all sorts of weird situations that need explaining, and it's just it's not a professional way of doing things, right? So we got to make sure everything's above board, everyone's being treated fairly, everything's being done in the professional way. I got to have your stuff by December 3rd. So don't wait till 11:59 on the night of December 3rd to try to turn it in, because if you're turning it in at 12:10 on the 4th, it can't accept it. So try to get that in. If you need to meet with me, I've got office hours. Not anymore today, but I will stick around after class and talk to anyone who wants to talk to me. I'll answer any questions, do any kind of explaining that you need so you can move forward with this stuff. I can imagine there's probably more than a couple people in this class that are a little stressed out at this point. Come talk to me, and I'll give you whatever advice and information I can give you so that you can try to finish successfully, right? I want you to finish successfully. You want you to finish successfully. The school wants you to finish successfully. So don't be intimidated. Don't be afraid to hop into office hours or come talk to me in Zoom as class is wrapping up, and I'll answer whatever questions you need or try to move you along. But this class is ending in a matter of days, so we need to finish everything up. So you've got your hypothesis test, your completed project. The best way to do it, the video, right? You have to submit a video. Don't send me a PowerPoint. Sometimes there's a confusion here. Students ask me, can my video contain a PowerPoint? If you use a PowerPoint or, the equivalent of PowerPoint for the visuals in your video, that's okay. But don't send me a PowerPoint. Send me a video. Okay? So that's fine. So I have numerous students do that with screen capture software. They've got a PowerPoint. They've got their slides all set up. When they're ready to talk about the next thing, they go to the next slide, and then they talk about it. Go to the next slide, talk about it. That's fine. But what you turn in is a video, not a PowerPoint, okay? Each individual person must turn in their own video project. Oops, I've got a typo in here. Double periods right there. Let me delete one. Each individual has to turn in their own project. There's always a couple people confused about this that are like, oh no, I worked with Sarah. Just give me the same grade you gave Sarah. No, each individual person must turn in their own video project. Okay? I don't want to have to give bad grades to people because they misunderstood. So understand, you each have to do your own. You can work together and help each other out, but you're each turning in your own project, right? Right, and that, okay, so the best way to do it, just post it to a YouTube channel. It's not going to go viral. You don't have to think it's going to be, people get embarrassed about it. No one's ever going to see it, right? YouTube is not going to like your video is not going to catch on and all of a sudden 100,000 people have watched your stats presentation. It just isn't going to happen. You'll have probably one view and it'll be me watching it. If you do that, make sure that you, like when you upload a video to YouTube, it's got three settings if I remember right. Private, then where people can view it with the link, or just totally public. Make sure I can view it, right? Any video that's turned in that I can't view, I can't grade. So you get a 0 as the grade. So if you're sending me a file format, right, like sending me an actual file that you're submitting up to Canvas, make sure it's a common file format, like a normal one that people should be able to read. I've got VLC Player, which can read all the normal, like mainstream codecs. But if you have some kind of weird thing where it requires a specific player to read it or to watch it, I'm not going to be able to watch it, right? So a lot of people turn their stuff in, they post to YouTube, make sure it's not set to private, give me the link, boom, easy. That's like the easiest way to do it. Some people have Vimeo accounts and they'll post to Vimeo. Okay, that's fine too, whatever works. Some people send me an actual file, but again, make sure it's a common file. It's not something where you have to have, a certain operating system or a certain player in order to read it. Make sure it's like a normal thing, okay, so that I can actually view it and grade it. And then other than that, it's the stuff we've been talking about. Make sure that you're, when you're making your video, don't worry about time when you're making the video, because then what you're going to do is you're going to stretch to make it longer, and then that actually makes your video less impactful. Just try to go through it, but at the end, if you realize it's 8 minutes long, you probably didn't cover enough material. You probably want to go a little longer. Most of the A papers I get are around the 15-minute mark. That doesn't mean that if your video is 15 minutes, you get an A, because I've also seen terrible videos that were 20 minutes long. And I've given A's to 12, 13-minute videos before because they were very concise, very well planned out, very precision. It was like a surgeon going in there and just doing exactly what they needed to do, and they got it done. Those are people that are probably a little more comfortable in front of the camera than, if this is your sort of first time making a video. So just kind of, again, don't make your video with the time in mind, but when you're done, you might check it and go, is this in the right range? It's only 8 minutes. I probably didn't talk about very much stuff. probably didn't cover all the topics in proper detail. Remember, in your video, if all you're doing is reading to me stuff that came out of StatCrunch, that's a very low grade. That's like a C/D, depending on all the variables. So if you're just reading, here's my interval from StatCrunch, here's my hypothesis test, so I failed to reject. Like if that's all that's going on, you get a very low grade. You want to give me the material, give me good visuals, fully labeled visuals. Talk to me about what's going on. Make conclusions. Tell me what it means. Don't just, I can just read StatCrunch on my own. I don't need a student for that. I can just punch numbers in there. What I want to know is, what are your conclusions in terms of your topics, right? Did you conclude that students who work more also take more units? Or was it the other way around? Students who work more take less units. Give me the real world conclusions. So you've got kind of two levels of conclusions. You've got the conclusion that's statistical and technical, where you're saying things like, the p-value was very low, so we rejected the null. That's great, but it doesn't mean anything in terms of people outside of statistics. And that's always something, whenever you're doing statistics, you need to communicate with people outside of statistics, right? So you have to be able to take that conclusion. What does that mean for what I'm studying? What does that mean in terms of, if your problem was students taking a certain number of units and working a certain number of hours, what does it mean in that context? Tell me what it means in the setting of the topic that you studied. Okay, that's how you get an A, is with those good, solid conclusions. So good math along the way. Tell me all that other stuff. Tell me your means and your medians, and you show me your visuals and all that other kind of stuff along the way. But to really get to the A work, you need to have good conclusions in with your good mathematical and statistical work that you did along the way. Okay, so keep that in mind. Remember, the point here is for me to figure out what you learned. The project is a great exercise for students. They learn way more than if I just give a paper and pencil test. I can see that when I'm grading things. But, realistically, none of you is going to create a project that's going to be published in a statistical journal, right? This was an educational project. So make sure that when you're making your project, you're communicating to me what you learn. I know one thing that I see a lot of students do is they try to hide their mistakes. You can learn through mistakes. So if you tell me you screwed up in a certain place and then you figured out how to fix it and you tell me what you did about it, then my conclusion is that you just learned something because you did it wrong and then you figured out how to fix it. Well, this person learned what they were doing. That's what I'm looking for in videos. So if you did things right, show me what you learned. If you did things wrong, show me what you learned from that mistake. Okay, this is not a thing where you should be hiding. I know it's just natural. People always try to hide their mistakes. Like if I see that you made a mistake, I'm going to mark you down. But you're not at that level of statistician yet where you're like, a graduate statistician who's going to be publishing papers or something. You're just learning how to do this. So the whole point is for me to see what you've learned, right? Show me what you've learned, right? I've had people who completely screwed up their questions for the survey, but they talked about it in the video and said, yeah, I know we talked about it in class about how to ask good questions and how to do questions the right way, but I didn't really get it, and my questions were so bad that I couldn't even use the data. Here's what I would do if I could do it again. That explanation tells me they learned something, right? Tells me, you learned about asking the right questions. That's good. Also, remember, you can use any questions in the survey. So if some of your questions didn't pan out the way you wanted, go grab some other questions from the survey. There's no ownership here. Okay, do whatever you need to do to get a passing grade or an A or whatever it is that you're trying for in the class, okay? I would encourage you, even though many of you have the work that you've been doing throughout the last month, just go back and look at it and see, could I quickly make that better in StatCrunch? At this point, you hopefully are better with statistics than you were 1, 2, 3, and 4 weeks ago, which means if you go back and do the same thing, you can probably do it better now. And it only takes a few seconds in StatCrunch. So if you're looking at your old histograms and you're like, I might be able to do a little better than those, Oh, and look, on this one, I forgot to label things. Like, all your graphs should be totally labeled with units, titles. If it doesn't, it just screams like, oh, this person didn't put in any effort. So make sure your visuals are labeled. Play around with your histograms. Play around with the bin size. See which one best communicates what you're trying to say. Maybe show 2 histograms of the same thing, but with a different bin size. That might give us some insight. So, whatever it is you think you need to do, but going back and polishing a little bit more instead of turning in the work you created 2 weeks ago, oftentimes can be the difference of like a B versus an A, or a C versus a B, or the big one, a C versus a D, right? So, don't be afraid to go back and redo a little bit of work. I mean, the truth is, in 30 minutes, you could probably redo all the work you've done for the whole project. And if it comes out a whole grade letter better because you know what you're doing now, then it's worth 30 minutes, right? Do make sure I can... let's see. I don't want anyone to misunderstand this statement here. Just don't want to confuse anyone, so I'm going to edit that one sentence. So again, you're making a video, you're communicating to me what you learned. You should hit all the major topics. Hit your summary data, your measures of center, your standard deviations. Tell me about your topic. Tell me about your questions. Tell me about a scatter plot with a correlation line in it. I mention this in class all the time, and yet I always see more of it. And I was looking at the submissions today. There's people with scatter plots with no linear regression on there. Why? I don't understand why. Even if you think the linear regression isn't good, show me that linear regression and then discuss, oh, well, we can see from the picture that this isn't a very good regression. And then also the R value is close to 0. So we know this linear regression is no good. Guess what? I just heard you talk about the topic, and I know that you learned something about it. So remember, that's what we're going for here. So you really should have the linear regression line in your scatter plot when you talk about it in there. You've got confidence intervals, you've got hypothesis tests to talk about, and then your conclusions about everything. Okay, put all that stuff together so that I can make the case that you learned enough statistics that you don't need to take this class again. Okay, right. Okay, now, so that's the project. So those are 2 things that are hadn't been released before, so they're going to show up where they weren't there, but I didn't want to have those 2 things up too early. But you've got your hypothesis testing discussion. You've got the completed project you're going to turn in, and then you've got the CSLO quiz, which actually you should do today. That's what we're going to talk about today, is that quiz. And then you should probably take it today. Most of you, if you've been doing the work that you should have been doing in this, like if you're on track to pass the class, you're probably going to pass that quiz. But the good news is it's stuff you're also should be doing in your project. And so, so I'm going to go over this quiz that you have to take, and we're going to look at it. And I just realized that I closed my StatCrunch window. So I'm going to have to make up something on the fly here. That's okay. We'll do that. So what's up with that? What does a CSLO quiz even mean? What is that thing? So it's a long story. Also, it says 3 points on it. It's going to be more like 30 to 40 points, and it's going to be project points. So it's another way to pad your project grade, because if you do well on this quiz, it should be like the project where it brings your grade up. And then if you get a lower score on your actual project, that quiz will help kind of dampen that bad score a little bit. So it is definitely in your best interest to do well on that quiz. So what is this quiz? Where does it come from? I actually have to give you this quiz. It's not even a choice of mine. Here's the situation. The school is up for accreditation review next year, and we have to do this thing called student learning outcome assessments. That's what Oh, actually it should be SLO. The person who created this quiz and the person who created this in the department has it typo in there. It shouldn't be CLSO. It should be CSLO. Anyways, it's course learning student outcomes. In other words, what do we expect you to learn in this class? So for accreditation, we have to give quizzes in certain classes. We do it like every couple years, and it just so happens it's due this semester. So we have to come up with questions that we test you and basically verify that students are learning what we think they're learning, and then that has to be submitted for accreditation. So it's kind of important because it's part of the accreditation process. You as a student of the school, you really, really want Ventura College to stay accredited, because if we're not, then what happens is less colleges and universities take our classes as transfer. They're less likely to say, oh, you took stats over at Ventura College? Okay, good. You don't have to take stats, right? It's more likely that they're like, oh, you took stats at Ventura College? Aren't they the ones that weren't they not accredited for a couple of years? Like, we don't want that, right? We want the school to be, in good standing so that all the classes you take here smoothly transfer to wherever you're going. The CSLO is part of that. So that's why it's mandatory that all the stats classes we have to give this semester. In fact, there's a few different math courses where we have to give these quizzes. So I'm going to go over the material and review the stuff you need to know to take that quiz. Then you're going to take it. So I'm not telling you what the quiz is. I can't just do the quiz with you, but I'm going to review that information a little bit, make sure you understand it, and then you want to take that quiz. It's due December 3rd, but if you can do it sooner so you don't start to forget stuff, take it sooner, right? That's how it is. So I guess I'm going to have to reopen. Give me a second to reopen this tab with StatCrunch. Also, if there's any questions, throw them into chat and I can answer them for you. Okay, so I lost my data. Let me just make up some data really quick here. So we'll call this work duties. And then we'll give this one okay, so I just made up this data, but let's make it work duties and pay. What was the thing I used earlier today? It was pay. There was a better name. I forget what they're called, but we'll just call it pay level. Okay, so I have two pieces of data here, and we want to know something about it. So easy enough. You go into stats, hit your summary stats, columns. You pick the one you want. I'm going to go with work duties. Hit compute, and it tells me a bunch of stuff, including my mean and my median. Notice how in this case the mean and median are pretty close together, right? Remember we talked about measures of central tendency. The mean and the median are both measures of central tendency. So how do we decide which one to use? Every situation's different, but the mean has a strength that is also its weakness. So it depends on what you have going on. When the mean and median are close together, it probably doesn't matter a whole lot which one you use. As the mean and median get separated from each other, what that usually indicates is that you have extreme value points, right? You have outliers in your data. That throws off the mean because the mean takes every single data point into the calculation when it calculates the mean. And you might think, well, yeah, that seems natural. Shouldn't we always do that? Well, that's also the weakness of the mean because it means one outlier can throw off the whole mean. Okay, so that's why, like, when you go look at if you're buying a house and you go look at neighborhoods, the housing, the information for that neighborhood almost never says the mean of housing prices. It always uses the median, because you can have one house in the neighborhood that's like twice as expensive. It throws off the mean for the whole neighborhood. So that would be misleading when you go there and there's all these houses cheaper than what you were expecting, and then one really, really expensive house. That outlier house skewed the mean one direction, sort of pushed it one direction, and then it was misleading. So in that case, you would use the median, which they almost always do in real estate. They use the median over the mean like 99% of the time. So that's the problem. When the mean has outliers, when the data has outliers, the mean can be misrepresented. Okay, so that's one way in which you decide which of those you should use. So on the quiz, you're going to have to find a mean. You're going to have to find a median. And you should definitely know how to do that in StatCrunch by now. And then you're going to have to make a justification about which is the right one to use. Okay, so like the discussion that we just talked about, which is the right one to use in the situation presented in the quiz. So you have to remember how to do that. So just think about it a bit. Use your critical thinking and think about, were there outliers? Is this misrepresentative? Maybe I should use the median. Maybe I should use the mean. Which is the right one to use? And then you're going to have to explain it. Okay, so that's part of the quiz. Another part of the quiz you're going to have to do is a scatter plot with a linear regression where you make sense of the linear regression. Good news, you got to do this on your project too. At least if you want to get a solid grade, you're going to have some stuff in there. So let's go through how we would do that with the scenario I have here. So this is just a made-up scenario. You saw me just make it up. It's sort of similar to a problem I made up earlier today. Let's just say at your job, everyone is assigned a certain number of duties, and everyone's on a different pay scale. Right? You get this in the military. You have, I forget, is it S and then a number, or P and then a number or something, but everyone's given like a pay scale. Like I'm P17 or whatever it is. You've got like a scale that's your pay grade. Well, it makes sense that the number of duties that you handle at work may influence that pay scale you're on, but it's probably not the only thing. Other times things affect it, like how long you've been there, how have your evaluations been since you've been there. Things like that can affect your pay level. So what we see is a bunch of people who have a different number of work duties, and then they're all on different pay scales. So we'd like to know, what does that look like? Can we come up with a regression for this? Could we make a prediction? Like, for instance, see there's nobody who has 10 work duties. Can we make a prediction for what would happen to the person who has 10 work duties? Can we make a prediction what their pay scale would be? Yeah, we want to be able to do stuff like that. So you go into, let's see, where was it? Stat. Go to regression, simple linear, click that. And then we have to pick our variables. So I want my X variable to be work duties. I want my Y variable to be pay level. We don't have to worry about these two things right now. You should be using hypothesis tests and confidence intervals and stuff for your project, but that's done slightly differently than this linear regression one. These are a little bit different. These are a hypothesis test to create the linear regression is a little different than what we did in class. On your projects, make sure that you have labeled these things. It only takes a second. X-axis label, Y-axis label, title. You should have all of those filled in, and you should have units when appropriate. So if it's height, make sure you say height in inches. If it's age in years. Like whatever it is, say the thing and the unit that you used, what that measurement is. These should not. When I see a graph in a video where these are left empty, it just screams low effort, right? It screams the person probably didn't learn the stuff very well. So make sure you fill those in. You just literally type it in there. Like this is what work duties, and then there's not really a unit for work duties, but if there's a unit, use it. And then pay level, and then the whole title, you'd put in like work duties versus pay level or whatever, right? Try to do a little better than that. Put a little more thought into it. I'm just showing you how to go through and put those things in there. Now, what's this prediction of y? Well, we can make a prediction. Once we have a linear regression, we can make a prediction about a missing value like I just talked about. Well, what about when we have 10 work duties? So I can put 10 in there, and it'll tell me the predicted value based on the linear regression. You're going to have to do that on the quiz, so make sure you're paying attention to how that works. I don't actually remember how it's done on the quiz because I haven't looked at it for a couple days, but the bottom line is you're going to have to use your linear regression to make a prediction about missing information. And we're going to look at two ways to do that. One is you can put it in here. Just make sure you're doing it right. I hit compute. Notice it says page 1 of 2. There's 2 pages here. Sometimes people don't realize there's another page that they want to be looking at. Okay, so what do we have here? Well, right here, this is our linear regression. Right? Basically, pay level is one of our variables. Work duties is another one. This is just y equals mx plus b that you learned back in beginning algebra. Technically, it's y equals b plus mx, but it's the same thing. I mean, it's literally that line you used to deal with before. Here's the R value. You probably want to mention that. The R value being 0.920658888. That's pretty high. That's a pretty high value. Remember, if your regression, if your R value is close to 1 or -1, you have a high correlation. The closer that number gets to 0, you have a worse correlation. There's 2 things you should do when you're talking about if your linear regression is good or not. One is to talk about the R value, like I've got highlighted right here. The other is to show the graph and talk about it. So here we go. Here's our graph. Looking at this, I go, yeah, that looks to me like a pretty solid linear regression. I think that's fitting the data pretty well. That looks like it's doing the job. So between the fact that it looks good and the fact that the R value is pretty high, say, yeah, that's a good linear regression. I'm going to use that. What about our prediction? Oh, look, it's got our predicted value down here. The predicted value, when the work duties is 10, the predicted pay scale is 9.3. So then we can predict, okay, that means they'd probably be a level 9, but maybe a level 10 sometimes. It just kind of depends on, so the other variables a little bit, but we would expect it to be around 9.3. So, you can't be in the middle of a pay scale, either 9 or 10. Okay, so lots of information in here, lots of things to talk about. A picture like this should absolutely be in your project. If it's not, I got to wonder why. Why don't you have a picture like that in there? Why is it missing? So make sure you put something like that in there. And then also know how to calculate. So I'm going to show you how to calculate by hand that predicted value in case you need to do it that way. So let me just take a photo here. Just so I have the data handy, because I'm going to have to change screens here. So let's jump over to something else. Where is it? Here it is. Okay. Oh, that's from the last class. Let's do our own stuff. Okay, so we were looking at... Actually, I can probably copy-paste some of it. Let's take this. Okay, so this is the equation. Whoops, my window is all messed up, isn't it? Here we go. That's not on the page. Let me see. There we go. Okay, so this is our equation. This is just y equals mx plus b. And you go, that kind of doesn't look like y equals mx plus b, but it is. Watch. This is just... Technically, it's y equals b plus mx. No different than what you were doing before. Y is our pay level variable. B is your intercept. M is your slope. and x is the work duties variable. It's just the variable from that different column. So we take, if we want to know a specific value for y given an x, we pick the x, we plug it in, we simplify it. You did this a million times in algebra. You're just doing it now in a more complex situation. So let's calculate it. So we've got y equals 1.922555814 plus 0.74186047 times 10. Because 10 was the question we asked about for the prediction, right? We said, what happens when x is 10? So I'm putting that in for my independent variable, and then we'll see what comes out for the other one. So in this, you just throw this into some calculator. I'm just going to throw it into Wolfram Alpha really quick. $9.34419. I think that's the same thing we got on the other page, right? 34419. So you just simplify this piece over here. Now this 0.7418647, that's your slope. And you probably remember back when you were taking algebra, your teacher kept calling the slope a rate of change, because that's literally what the slope represents. It's how the two variables change in relation to each other. So how would you read this? Well, this would mean that for each additional work duty that you are assigned, you can expect to go up 0.7418647 pay scales, pay levels, right? That's what that slope is telling us. And it didn't work out perfectly for everyone, because as we can see, there's some variation. Look, these people both have 6 work duties, but look, they're on a different pay scale. So it's a little bit different what different people are getting. But in general, when we sort of look at everything all together, that's what we're seeing, is that when you get assigned one more work duty, you go up about 3/4 of a pay level. Okay. Right. Obviously, you can't go up 3/4 of a pay level, but that's what it averages out to. The mean comes out to be roughly that. Okay. So 2 different ways on the quiz that you can predict a missing value. You can have StatCrunch do it for you. You can calculate it by hand. I don't remember the details of how the quiz is set up. I just remember the basics, that there's like some correlation on there, and then you have to come up with a linear regression and then use the linear regression, right? So I'm just kind of giving you a review on how to do that problem. Okay, so that's how you would do that one by hand. Okay, let's see what else. That's the other class. So with that, let's go back. We've got that. So definitely include something like this in your project, the graph, and then know how to do it for your quiz that you need to do. Let me show you again. The quiz is down here at the, it's down at the bottom of the page. And I know there's like a ton of stuff due now, because I had to give people enough time to work on stuff. But you've got December 3rd, everything's due. You've got your quiz down here. You only get one shot at the quiz, so make sure when you do it, you're like ready to do it. But we need those numbers for accreditation. It's pretty serious business. So you've got that due. You've got the homework all due on chapters 10. Chapter 9 is largely due today. Don't forget that project. This is your confidence interval stuff. Don't remember to turn that in, or do remember to turn that in. Don't forget to turn it in. You want to make sure you get that. So get your points there. Chapter 8. Chapter 7, I messed up the due date earlier in the semester, so I just kept it. It's kind of weird that it's due December 1st, which is before chapter 8, but once I didn't want to shorten the date because then it makes students kind of nervous, so I just left it out there at December 1st. But make sure you're getting all this stuff in. And then all this stuff is previous, so that was already due. Okay, so that kind of takes us to where we are in the class. We have not much time left. So let's go academic calendar. Let me look up that calendar. Third's Friday, right? Yep, third is Friday. That's what I thought it was. So class ends Friday, right? They didn't even give you Saturday and Sunday to work on stuff. So I got to follow the dates in the course, right? So if it was me, I would extend it, but it's not my choice. I have to do what the whatever the school designs for that the length of that course. I have to follow that. That's not a decision that I get to make. So make sure everything is in by the end of the day on the 3rd. I cannot take any work after that unless, like I say, you have like a medical condition or something like that. So make sure that's in. There's finals week, but finals don't apply for this class. The late start classes actually end extra early too, which is kind of frustrating. Seems like they could at least let it go till the 8th. That's what they used to do, but now they've started ending them all on the 3rd. I'm not sure why that is, but your other classes, you may have other classes that take place during finals week, and if that's the case, then you can look up the final schedules in the same place as the academic calendar. See, it's right up here, final exam schedule, but I won't go over it because in this class, you don't have a final. You just have to turn in your project so that I can grade the thing, okay? So make sure you do that. Is there any questions that anybody has? Kind of finished a couple minutes early. I can't really start any new topics, but I can answer questions if anybody has a question. So here's what I'll do. At this point, I'm going to turn off the YouTube stream. I will leave Zoom open for... Oh, wait. This is the class that goes to 1:15. I always mess that up. Finally starting to figure out it goes to 1:15. Okay, so let's talk about some more stuff then. We have another 20 minutes to talk about stuff. I almost messed it up again. Okay, so with that said, what else was I going to talk about? Give me a second to kind of collect my thoughts here. Let's go back here. So where we've got the hypothesis testing, right? We've got that. Yeah, chapters 7 and 8 are important, but really not. They're really setting up chapters 9 and 10. 9 and 10 are definitely topics you should be addressing in your projects. Okay, so chapter 9 is largely estimating the value of a parameter, confidence intervals, basically confidence intervals. Chapter 10, hypothesis testing. Absolutely, in your project, you need to address confidence intervals and hypothesis tests. You want to show me that you've used them. You want to explain the results to me. And there's always a little confusion here on this topic. Don't be afraid to give me the technical details. For instance, people get locked up in that they memorize that language about rejecting the null or failing to reject the null and that whole thing. That's fine. You can tell me you rejected the null or you failed to reject the null. That's fine. But that should not be your only conclusion. Give me a real world interpretation of your work, because like when I've given this example before, but it seems that people always kind of miss it. There's always a few people who miss this concept. When you're working somewhere or you're running your own business or you're doing research, you're never going to go to someone else and say, hey, Joe, guess what? I just rejected the null. And they're going to be like, awesome. That's great news. That's never going to happen because no one's going to know what you're talking about. Okay. And trust me, no one wants to sit down and read your scratch work, right? As a professor, I can tell you trying to work your way through someone else's scratch work it's torture. They just want to know what you concluded. Okay, so you can put in there in your conclusion when you're talking in your video, feel free to say, oh yeah, we did this, the p-value was low, we rejected the null, so we went with the alternative hypothesis, but then tell me what that means. Say, okay, we concluded then that the proportion of people who support the vaccine mandate is above 0.8. That's like a conclusion that someone understands. You see what I'm saying? The difference between if you walk in a room and tell everyone you rejected the null versus walking in a room and telling everyone that you believe that the proportion of people who accept the vaccine mandate is above 0.8. Those are very different things. People are going to have no idea what you're talking about in the first case. They are probably going to understand what you're talking about in the second case. Okay? So there's like the two levels of conclusions. You want to give both. A project with no conclusions or other stuff gets a very low grade, possibly a failing grade. Like, again, if you're just reading me stuff that came out of StatCrunch, it doesn't mean anything, right? You're just sort of reading outputs from pressing buttons in StatCrunch. You got to tell me what it all means. You got to make it meaningful. Like I've kind of been saying throughout this semester, you construct a narrative, you construct a story. Think of it as a lawyer in a courtroom. You're constructing a narrative that you want to tell. Your narrative is, I think that the number of people who now support a vaccine mandate, the proportion is above 0.8. And here's my evidence. And then you give evidence that could be in the form of a confidence interval. Your evidence could be in the form of a hypothesis test. It could be there's lots of different forms that it could take from the work that you've been doing throughout this semester. So put it to work, right? But, and make good conclusions. That's when I start seeing students who get, good grades on those projects. Visuals are a big thing because when it comes to presentations, people don't like looking at text in general. It's just one of, if you study like how to make good presentations, you're gonna see the phrase wall of text, right? That's what happens when someone puts up a PowerPoint slide with an entire paragraph in it. And you know who reads that? The person who wrote it is the only person who reads it. People do not sit there and read those things in a presentation, right? People are essentially, they like shiny objects, right? They want to see a picture. They don't want to see a novel up there. And that doesn't mean you can't put a conclusion up there. If you want to type out your conclusion and put it on the screen, go for it. But it probably shouldn't be up there for 5 minutes, right? People would much rather look at visuals. I'm particularly looking at them to make sure you can make quality visuals, but that you're choosing appropriate visuals. You use the right thing. I have students who, even at this point, won't really understand the difference between quantitative data and qualitative data. And they'll end up using things incorrectly, and then it comes through on the visual because this person thinks that, telephone numbers are quantitative or, whatever it is, right? So spend a little time with your visuals. I don't mean you got to spend all night, but play around with them a little bit in StatCrunch. Pick good bin sizes. Make sure it's a good visual. Label everything. And it only takes a few seconds. You might have 3 or 4 different visuals for the same question. Great. They might show different aspects of the data. So don't be afraid of showing like too many visuals. I mean, as long as they're good and you can justify them. I'm not saying make 12 visuals for every question. But if you have a good histogram and at the same time you have another version, let's look at all of them, right? Explain why you used a few different things and explain what those things show. Again, if you explain what your visual is saying to us statistically, then that indicates to me that you are learning something, that you learned something, right? Which is the whole point of this project, is to communicate to me what you learned. So make sure that you're taking some time with your visuals. Like I say, I would recommend go back to the stuff you turned in a couple weeks ago and just take a few seconds to redo it. See if you can do a little better, right? Like these little small changes that you go back and make now, if you make, you might go, oh, this is barely worth it. That's only going to change my grade by what, 1% or 2%. Well, if you do 10 things that change your grade 2%, that's 2 letter grades. You just improved your whole project, right? So little differences can make a big difference. If I see, oh, that's a really good visual. That person knows what they're doing. That person is doing good work here. You're going to get a better grade. So make sure you're putting in good visuals. Make sure you're summarizing your data. Tell me about your data. Make me interested in your topic. Explain to me why we care. Explain to me what you figured out. Explain to me what you wanted to figure out but weren't able to figure out and why you didn't get there, right? Again, that's one of those cases where it's like, oh, well, at first I thought I was going to do this, but then it didn't quite go that way. But if you learned something in the process, tell me about that. Tell me about what you learned in that process, and then I'll know that you learned some stuff, right? I taught the other stats class this morning, so I can't remember what I said to you and what I said to them. But remember, you can use any questions in the survey. If your questions didn't come out the way you wanted, find another question and use that one. There's no ownership. Just because it wasn't your question, that's okay. I had some people who didn't submit questions. They wouldn't be able to do the project then, right? No, they can use other questions, right? So if you're someone who didn't get your questions in, just pick the questions that you need from the survey and go from it. I've had students do that where 2 groups were doing similar topics, but they asked their questions in different ways. And actually both groups ended up stealing problems from the other group. And by stealing, I mean it's understood we're all sharing these questions. And then both groups did a better job because they had more questions to work from and were able to make more interesting conclusions. Okay, so don't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid to explain to me the mistakes you made. Again, it's an opportunity to show me what you learned. And learning through mistakes, honestly, is usually how we learn things, through mistakes. But then, like in our culture, we try to pretend like we never made that mistake and we're perfect all the time, which really just ends up keeping people from trying very hard because then they're so afraid of making a mistake. But in statistics and math, that's all you do is make mistakes until all of a sudden you figure it out and then you don't make mistakes anymore and then everyone thinks you're like really smart. But really it's just, you make mistakes until you don't make mistakes anymore. So feel free to talk about that kind of stuff. Tell me about your central tendency for your questions, your dispersion, your standard deviation, that kind of stuff. Showing me some box plots. I've seen some students do interesting things with box plots. You don't have to use a box plot, but it's not a bad idea. If you understand them and you can make an interesting statement with them, go for it, right? Absolutely, I should see a discussion on regression. I mean, that by itself should take like 4 minutes, right? So you've got some major topics, all of which should take like 4 minutes to talk about. Hypothesis test. How could you talk about that in less than 3 or 4 minutes? Confidence interval. How could that take less than 3 or 4 minutes? Scatter plot with a linear regression graphed on the scatter plot with an R value and a linear model that you can now use to make predictions. How could that take less than 4 minutes? Showing me your visuals, explaining your topic to me, and your question should take 4 minutes. I mean, pretty easily get yourself to a 20-minute video. And again, I'm not saying you should all make 20-minute videos, but if you're talking about hypothesis tests for 20 seconds or 30 seconds, you probably didn't really address the issue very much, right? So make sure you're getting these 3 things done. Also, are there any questions? Does anyone have, for the people that are here right now, it looks like for this class, most people are watching the video at a later time. So that's why we have kind of low attendance. But when I look at the views, there tends to be more views. They're just happening later. But for the people that are here watching live, does anybody have a question for me about the project, about when stuff is due, about what you're supposed to do to anything? Feel free to throw it into the chat there. No one's going to judge you because probably only 2 or 3 people know who you are in the class anyways, and they probably have the same question. So if you have any questions, throw them up there. I'm happy to answer those for you. What day is today? Tuesday. I do have office hours tomorrow, Wednesday. No, No, I don't have office hours on Wednesday, but I do have office hours on Thursday if you want to stop by and get help. Other than that, if you need to get a hold of me, I might be able to, schedule a Zoom meeting with you if you need some kind of help, but I might not outside of office hours. I can try to give me a little bit of notice. I might be able to set something up if you're having difficulty, right? I know this class was very challenging. I'm not even sure that they should offer this class. We're all sort of the guinea pigs here. And they literally asked us at the department meeting that I had, what was it, like 2 weeks ago or something? They asked me and the other individual who's teaching this class, like, well, how's it going? And we're like, well, there was a lot of confusion. And it, in any class, there's a lot of confusion while students kind of get started. But in a 4-week class, if some students are confused for a week, that's 25% of the class is gone already. So it's a very fast-moving class. So if it was stressful to you, that's sort of the nature of the beast. It's a stressful class. I can't imagine taking this class this quickly. But those of you who have stuck with it and done your work, good job. Finish strong so that I can, give you your passing grade, and then you'll be done with statistics. And then we'll see how it goes. But also some of that is students sometimes, especially online, we're noticing there's less student engagement in general. There's less students coming to office hours, right? So, and it's hard. We've only known each other a few weeks, and you've just kind of watched me on YouTube a little bit. So some of you are probably intimidated to hop into Zoom and talk to me. That's a thing that we're hearing from students more, is that, if we were in a classroom, so many of you would have just after class come up and talked to me and said, I'm confused about this one thing. And then I would explain it to you, right? And then you'd go, oh, I get it. And then we'd move on. But there's not really as much interaction with that. Even though I leave the classes open at the end of class, students are kind of nervous about, oh, I'm going to be on Zoom and my face is there and then I'm talking. And it's a little different than just talking to me as a human after class. But, you want to remember what the goal is here. The goal here is that you don't have to take statistics again. So it's much better to sort of get outside your comfort zone and come talk to me in office hours. If I can give you some information that means you won't be taking this again in the spring, right? I don't want you to take this class again in the spring, and you don't want to take it again in the spring. The school certainly doesn't want you to take it again in the spring, so we should all, we all should do everything we can to meet that goal of making sure that you pass, but we have to do it legitimately. But so the bottom line is, if you have questions or concerns, now is the time to come to me, like today after class, tomorrow if you schedule a time with me, Thursday. The reality is Friday I'm probably not going to be around much, so if you have an emergency that's going down Friday, I probably won't be able to help you much with it. So sort of plan out the next few days and how you're going to work through the class and what you're going to do to finish this stuff and get it completed. Okay. No question. I'm not seeing any questions about the project here. That's kind of all I had expected to talk about. Let me just double check stuff here. Going through StatCrunch. That's another thing about this short class. I know some students were still confused mid to late week 2. Some students were still confused about getting the access code. There was confusion about like the short-term free code versus the free code from the bookstore. And then some students thought that they were out of luck when the free trial ended. So there was confusion about that. It's all just made extra hard in a 4-week class. Whoops, this mouse has too many buttons. I actually accidentally clicked the wrong one here. Let me go back. Okay, so a little bit of information then about how this will work is basically the Monday after you turn your stuff in, I'm going to start submitting grades. So now what that means is I have to watch a lot of videos, and watching videos excuse me, takes a lot of time. Plus on Monday, I still have classes to teach on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, right? I think final starts on a Thursday. So I'll be grading it like on the same time I'm still teaching my other classes. Not literally the same time, but like when I have breaks in between my classes, I'll start trying to go through and finalize grades for this class. Okay. I don't send out emails for individual grades, and there's a reason for that. One is that it takes forever. I mean, I have 200 students. Imagine composing 200 emails. How long is that going to take? Long time. And that time I'm spending composing emails, I'm not doing other work that like students need to get done, right? So I can't. Plus, we're actually not supposed to email grades, because another thing that has to do with accreditation is your privacy. There are state and federal laws protecting your privacy in this class. I'm not allowed to go to other people and say like, hey, yeah, see that person over there? He's getting a D in my class. Like, I can't share information about you as a student, right? You're protected by the school. Well, that protection carries over to electronic messages, because when I get an email, I don't really know if it's you. I don't know who I'm sharing that information with. If I then send out an email and then someone else is able to read your email, then I'm the one who has put out private information. So we're actually not supposed to do that. I know it sounds weird, but there have been cases where, an ex-boyfriend still has access to somebody's email account or something like that, and then all of a sudden we didn't keep your information private, right? So it's way more complicated than you might think. So we don't send out emails with grades. We're not supposed to. I know some of your professors do, but we're not really supposed to do that. Oops, looks like the Zoom meeting just collapsed. Let me set that up. But what I will do is I'm going to get the grades submitted as soon as I can. And so basically what happens, they change it every semester, but what usually happens is that we submit grades throughout the day, and then at night the server runs like a routine and it finalizes all those grades, which means it then populates it throughout the school where that information needs to be, meaning the next day you should be able to see them. They should show up in your VC portal. So while it may seem like, man, he won't email me my grade, you'll get it like 12 hours later when the server runs through and finalizes it. So it's not really that much longer that it's going to take till you get your grade. Okay. The grade, I just follow the rules that are given in the syllabus as far as the grades, right? You're going to be looking at your homework, going to be looking at your projects, right? Probably, like, here's the thing that happens. Probably it's not really useful to send me an email telling me how you really want to pass the class, because you all want to pass the class. Like, you never run into someone who's like, I don't need to pass this class, just fail me. Like, everyone wants to pass, right? But I'll get these emails where students talk about how they really, really want it. They really want me to pass them. And then I look and it's like, well, you did 50% of the homework and you didn't really do very good on your project. So like, what reason should you be given to pass, right? I mean, you kind of have to have a good case. And the thing is, the people who have the good case, they don't need to ask because they already have the good grades in the homework and the project. So you're welcome to email me about stuff, but if you're just telling me you really want an A or you really want a C, that doesn't really come into the equation. It's your scores or what we have to pass you on or not pass you on, just so you know. Okay, so that's kind of how next week will run. If you want to email me and tell me your thoughts on the class and how it was being in a class that moved this fast, that would be okay, because we kind of want a little bit of feedback on the class and how it was crazy fast, and if that was a good thing or a bad thing, or feel free to do that if you want to say something about it. And then your grades will show up in your VC portal, and you can look there and see how you did. I can't change grades unless there was a mistake on my part. So again, if you earned a C but you really, really wanted a B, we don't grade that way. It's not based on what you really, really want. But and I get emails that say that I really, really want a B. Okay, but you should have done more homework then is kind of the thing, right? Let's see. What else do we need to know about how the class is going? Make sure you turn your project in a file I can read. Make sure you get everything in on time, and then take it easy, right? If you did your good work over the last 4 weeks, 5 weeks, whatever it is, 4.5 weeks, you'll be fine. Just, don't drive yourself crazy about it, and then give yourself, a break, winter break, where you can, recoup a little bit, because most of you are probably taking classes in the spring again, and it's going to be kind of wild in the spring because many more classes are at least partially taking place on campus. Remember, there's a vaccine mandate that is in effect. So if you have not been vaccinated but you expect to be on campus in the spring, I would act on that now, because I can imagine there's going to be a massive number of people on the first day of school all trying to get verified with their vaccination cards, but I don't see how they could have enough people verifying vaccine cards to keep up with the amount of people who will have waited till the last minute to submit their vaccine cards. So if you're taking classes on campus in the spring, I would get that card submitted now so that you're not one of those people who doesn't make it to class on the first day. What else? I think that's about it for now. I think we're good. So anyone who wants to hop into Zoom and talk to me, go ahead. Otherwise, please make sure you see this quiz. This quiz has to be taken care of. Shouldn't even take you long. 10 minutes probably if you know what you're doing, if you've been doing stuff along the way. But I have to report those results to my superiors, so I need that data. Okay, and like I say, it won't be 3 points. It'll be more like 30 points, something like that, going towards the project. So that's a nice little buffer for you. So take your time. Make sure you put some effort into that quiz. Try to get all those problems correct. Okay. Read the directions carefully. Sometimes there's a direction that says specifically, here's how you should say your answer. So make sure you say it the right way. You don't want to miss points just because you didn't read the directions, right? So take your time. Do it carefully. Okay, I'm going to shut down the YouTube stream. Hop into Zoom if you want to talk to me. Thanks, everybody.